Attention! A real story verified by a team specializing in the paranormal, with testimonies, images, and received documents. Proceeding may shock or disturb you and affect your emotional and mental state. Watch at your own risk. The Blonde on the Road.
My name doesn't matter, and you'll soon understand why. All I can say is that I've been a truck driver for over 15 years. I travel all over Brazil. I know every curve, every stop, every dangerous stretch of these roads that cut across our country. I'm speaking to you from inside my cabin. It's dawn, and I've just pulled over at a gas station on BR-116, near the border between São Paulo and Paraná. The place is empty. Only a few dim lights illuminate the outlines of the parked trucks. The wind rattles the rusted metal signs, creating a sound that has sent shivers down my spine ever since that night. You must be wondering why my voice is altered, why I chose to record this secretly in the middle of the night. It's because I'm a married man, a family man, and what I'm about to tell, what happened to me a few months ago, changed everything. My wife can't know, my children can't find out, but I can't bear to carry this alone anymore. Here with me I have documents that I sent to this channel, GPS records, a footage I unintentionally made that night, talking to myself in the cabin as if someone was with me. There's also a police report that cannot be fully disclosed. You'll understand when I finish telling my story. The road at night has its own secrets. Any experienced truck driver knows this. There are stretches where you feel you're being watched, places where the radio doesn't pick up, where even the newest trucks start to fail without explanation. But what happened to me? That goes beyond any road superstition. It was a Thursday in August, clear sky, almost a full moon. I was heading south, a load of electronics, a tight deadline. I knew that route like the back of my hand. I never imagined that a simple rest stop would connect me with something that shouldn't exist. It was almost 10 at night when I arrived at the KM 847 stop, a place every truck driver knows, a gas station, a 24-hour diner, a few rooms for rest. Nothing special, one of those spots that serve as a refuge for those who live on the road. I'd been driving for 8 hours straight. My body was begging for rest, but the schedule was tight. My idea was just to refuel, grab a strong coffee, and continue my journey. I wanted to reach Curitiba before dawn to make the delivery and still have time to call my family. I parked in the heavy vehicle area between two other trucks. The place was relatively busy for that time of night. Some drivers talking near their vehicles, others already retired to their cabins. The diner lights were on, that typical yellowish glow of roadside establishments. But there was something different that night. I can't explain exactly what. Maybe it was the unusual silence. Even with movement, conversations seemed muffled, as if the air was denser. The other truck drivers were more serious than usual. Some looked around with a restlessness I couldn't comprehend. The gas attendant greeted me with a nod, but avoided eye contact. I noticed he worked faster than usual, as if he wanted to finish quickly and go inside. Even the stray dogs that always roamed the place were quiet, huddled near the diner entrance, staring fixedly into the darkness of the road. I entered the diner, ordering a double coffee and a sandwich. The waitress, an elderly lady I knew from other stops, was visibly nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared my order. When I asked if everything was all right, she just mumbled something about strange nights and things that shouldn't be wandering around. I found it strange but didn't give it much thought. Truck drivers are somewhat superstitious, always having a ghost story to tell. I finished my meal quickly. I was eager to get back on the road and stick to my schedule. It was when I was returning to the truck that I saw her for the first time. She was standing near my truck, leaning against the side of the trailer, as if she was specifically waiting for me. A blonde woman, probably in her mid-30s, wearing a light blouse and a skirt that drew attention. But it wasn't just her clothes or her beauty that intrigued me. It was the fact that I was absolutely certain no one had been there when I got out of the truck 15 minutes earlier. The strangest thing is that despite the movement at the station, she seemed completely isolated. The other truck drivers passed by without even looking in her direction, as if she were invisible to everyone but me. This should have alerted me, but at the time I confess I was more intrigued than worried. As I approached, she smiled, a smile that was both seductive and unsettling. Her eyes were a very clear, almost translucent blue, and there was something in them that immediately made me uncomfortable. It was as if she knew, as if she was intimidating me with a look of desire. "Are you going south?" she asked. Her voice was soft, melodious, but there was a subtle echo as if it came from very far away. "I need a ride to the city of Registro. I can pay, if you prefer." At that moment, I felt something I had never experienced before. A sense of déjà vu so strong it made me dizzy. It was as if this conversation had happened before, as if I already knew exactly what she would say next. But that was impossible. I had never seen that woman in my life. I tried to grab my phone to check the route, but the screen showed no signal. Strange, because there was always coverage at that stop. I looked around and realized that other truck drivers were also fiddling with their phones. "Registro is on my route," I replied, still somewhat hesitant. "But it's almost 300 kilometers from here. It's going to be a long trip, and I plan to drive all night." She took another step closer. That's when I noticed her cleavage. Despite the cold wind that had started to blow, even with her hair exposed to the wind, her beauty was striking. Her clothes were not suitable for that weather, very tight, accentuating her body's curves. It was as if she had been sent as a gift on such a stressful journey. "Time is not a problem for me," she said, and there was something in the way she pronounced those words that made me think of other possibilities. In fact, I have the impression that this trip was already destined to happen. It was at that moment that I looked more closely at her feet. She was wearing high-heeled sandals, but I couldn't see any mark on the gravel where she stepped. No dust, no small displaced stones, nothing. It was as if she didn't have enough weight to leave traces with her elegance and subtlety. I should have turned back right then. I should have made an excuse and left, but I couldn't. There was something about her that attracted me in an inexplicable, almost hypnotic way. It was as if an invisible force was making my decisions for me. "You can get in," I heard my own voice saying without my having consciously decided to accept. And that's when the night truly began. And that's when the night really began. During the first few kilometers, I tried to maintain a normal conversation. I asked her name, she only said Laura, where she was from, where exactly in Registro she was going. Her answers were always vague, deflecting the subject to me, to my life, my family. "You're married, aren't you?" she asked, looking at the ring on my finger. There was a strange curiosity in her voice, as if the answer was important for something I didn't understand. I confirmed that I was, briefly talked about my wife and children. But with every word I spoke, I felt as if I was betraying some secret. She listened with disconcerting attention, nodding slowly, an almost imperceptible smile on her lips. It was around midnight that she started to get closer. Closer. She adjusted her seat to be nearer, began asking more intimate questions. How my marriage was, if I was happy, if I had ever been tempted during these long solo trips. I tried to keep my focus on the road, but it was impossible to ignore her presence. There was a perfume emanating from her, not a common perfume, but something sweet and heavy, almost intoxicating. And her voice, every word she uttered seemed enveloped in a hypnotic melody. The radio started to fail. First it was just small interferences, then it turned into a cacophony of distorted voices that made my head ache. I turned the device off, but the silence that followed was even more disturbing. The only sound was the roar of the engine and our breathing. "You know," she said, lightly running her hand over my arm, "men like you deserve more attention. They work so hard, spend so much time away from home. It's natural that they feel needs." I knew I should stop that conversation, change the subject, but there was something hypnotic in the way she spoke. It was as if each word was carefully chosen to awaken something dormant inside me. My resistance was diminishing with each kilometer. Around 2 in the morning, I realized we were completely alone on the road. Not a single vehicle had passed in the last 30 minutes. The moon, which had been bright before, now hid behind dense clouds, leaving only the headlights to illuminate the asphalt ahead. That's when she leaned her head on my shoulder. Foi quando ela encostou a cabeça no meu ombro. "You're tense," she whispered, her warm breath on my neck. For a man who spends so much time alone, it must be hard to resist when someone offers, company. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Part of me screamed to stop the truck and tell her to get out, but another part wanted more of that closeness. It was as if two opposing forces were fighting inside my mind. "Would your wife appreciate a man like you?" she continued, her hand now resting on my thigh. "Or is she just another one of those who complain, who don't understand the sacrifices you make?" The truck started making strange noises, small engine failures I had never heard before. The speedometer fluctuated without apparent reason, and the dashboard lights flickered erratically, but I could barely focus on the mechanical problems. "There's a side road a few kilometers ahead," she said, as if she knew exactly where we were, even though I hadn't mentioned any landmarks. "A discreet place where we could talk better, without rushing, without interruptions." And it was at that moment that I made the mistake that would change my life forever. Instead of questioning how she knew that road, instead of noticing all the strange signs that were accumulating, I just nodded. "Maybe that's a good idea after all," I heard my own voice respond, as if it belonged to someone else. The last defenses of my consciousness were crumbling, and I didn't even realize that I was being led to something far beyond a simple betrayal. The side road was exactly where she had said it would be. A dirt entrance I had never noticed in all the times I had passed through there. I pulled the truck about 50 meters in, out of sight from the main highway. The place was completely isolated, surrounded by tall eucalyptus trees that created dense shadows even with the headlights on. The last defenses of my consciousness were crumbling, and I didn't even realize that I was being led to something far beyond a simple betrayal. "Perfect," she whispered, with a smile that now seemed different to me. There was something predatory about it, something that should have alerted me, but my mind was completely clouded by the desire she had awakened. I got out of the cabin with trembling legs. The air was freezing, much colder than it should have been for an August night. My breath formed small clouds of vapor, and I felt a shiver run through my entire body like an electric current. I opened the back of the truck and began preparing a space between the cargo boxes. I always carried a few blankets for emergencies, and I spread them on the metal floor, trying to create something minimally comfortable. My hands trembled. I didn't know if it was from the cold or from anticipation. "I'll be right back," she said behind me. "I'm just going to get ready." I continued tidying the spot, folding one of the blankets to serve as a pillow. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. Part of me still tried to process what I was about to do, the betrayal I was committing, but it was as if my free will had been completely annulled. When I finished, I turned to call her. There was no one there. When I finished, I turned to call her. There was no one. "Laura," I called out, thinking she might have just walked away for privacy. My voice echoed through the eucalyptus trees, returning distorted and strange. "Laura, where are you?" I grabbed the flashlight from the cabin and started searching. I illuminated the entire area around the truck, every tree, every bush, nothing. It was as if she had simply vanished. Despair began to consume me. I walked to the main road thinking that maybe she had changed her mind and decided to hitch a ride with someone else. But the highway was completely empty, not a single headlight on the horizon. The silence was deafening. I rushed back to the truck, determined to leave that place. But when I turned the key, just a dry click, I tried again. Nothing. The engine that had worked perfectly throughout the trip now refused to show any sign of life. I opened the hood with my hands shaking uncontrollably. The battery was dead. The cables loose as if someone had deliberately disconnected them. But that was impossible. No one had touched the engine but me. It was while reconnecting the cables that I felt it for the first time. A presence behind me. It wasn't the sound of footsteps, it wasn't physical movement. It was something much more primal, an absolute certainty that something was watching me from the shadows among the trees. Something that shouldn't be there, something that didn't belong to the world of the living. When I turned, illuminating the forest with the flashlight, I saw only trees swaying in the wind. But the shadows moved independently, as if they had a life of their own. And for an instant, just an instant, I swear I saw a feminine silhouette among the tree trunks, watching me with those translucent blue eyes. The truck roared back to life, breaking the deadly silence of the forest. I wasted no time. I ran to the cabin, engaged reverse, and got out of that place as if my life depended on it. Throughout the entire journey back to the main highway, I felt as if something was following me through the shadows, always keeping its distance but never truly leaving. Only when the city lights appeared on the horizon could I breathe again. But I knew that wasn't the end. In fact, it had only just begun. 3 days later, at a stop in Auriños, I told the story to some fellow truck drivers. The reaction was exactly what I expected. Laughter, jokes about a ghost blonde, and comments about me having drunk too much. But one of the older truck drivers, Seu Antonio, became serious. "Son," he said, lowering his voice, "you're not the first to report strange things in that region. There are drivers who swear they've seen a woman hitchhiking on that stretch, always late at night, always disappearing afterwards." The laughter stopped. Others started telling similar cases: apparitions, people vanishing into thin air, trucks breaking down without explanation. They were always vague accounts, stories from third parties, but there was a disturbing pattern. I spent weeks trying to forget, but that night haunted me. I dreamed of her every dawn, woke up with that sweet scent in the air even when I was home with my family. My wife commented that I was different, more distant, always staring into space as if waiting to see someone. 2 months later, I had to make a delivery that passed through that region again. Against all common sense, I decided to stop at the same gas station where everything had started. I needed answers, even if it meant facing my own fears. The gas attendant was the same one from that night. When I asked about women who usually hitchhiked there, he became visibly uncomfortable. He tried to change the subject, but I insisted. That's when the diner owner approached. "You're asking about Laura, aren't you?" he said, looking around to make sure no one else was listening. "Boy, this story is more complicated than you imagine." He told me that about 6 months ago, a young blonde woman had disappeared in that region. Laura Cristina, 32, a psychologist from São Paulo. She was traveling alone to a conference in Curitiba when she simply vanished. Her car was found abandoned a few kilometers away, with no signs of violence, as if she had simply gotten out and walked into nothingness. "The case was in all the newspapers," he continued. "Police searched everywhere. Her family offered a reward, but they never found a trace of her." He kept a copy of the newspaper from that time. When I saw her photo on the front page, my blood ran cold. It was her, exactly her. The same woman who had hitchhiked, wearing the same clothes described in the disappearance, the same unsettling smile. But the disappearance date was 2 months before the night I met her. It took me 3 days to gather the courage to call my friend Carlos, a civil police investigator who worked in that region. I told him the whole story, even knowing how absurd it would sound. To my surprise, he didn't laugh or doubt me. "Can you take me to the exact spot where she disappeared?" was all he asked. The following week, we met on the side road. Carlos brought a small, discreet team. The place was exactly as I had left it, but now, in daylight, it seemed even more sinister. The trees formed a dark tunnel, and there was a heavy smell in the air, as if something was rotting. We walked into the woods, following an almost imperceptible trail. After about 200 meters, we found a structure that wasn't visible from the road, a partly destroyed wooden shack covered in vines and tall grass. Carlos forced the door open. The smell that came out of there, I'll never forget. It was a sweet and rotten odor at the same time that clung to your throat and made your eyes water. And there, in a corner of the shack, covered by dry leaves and branches, was the body, Laura Cristina. The same clothes as in the newspaper photo, the same clothes she wore the night she hitched a ride with me. The state of decomposition indicated she had been dead for months, exactly since her disappearance date. The woman who had entered my truck, who had talked to me for hours, who had touched me, had been dead for 2 months when this happened. The case made national headlines. I had to testify, but I managed to maintain my anonymity. Officially, we went there following an anonymous tip. Carlos never questioned my version of events, but in his eyes, I saw that he knew there was more to the story. Her family finally had someone to bury. But for me, the questions had only just begun. How is it possible to talk to someone who was already dead? How did she know my name, details of my life that I had never told anyone? And why me? These are questions that haunt me to this day. Essas são perguntas que me assombram até hoje. This happened 4 months ago, and since the day we found her body, I've never seen her again. It's as if after being found, after her family could finally bury her with dignity, she found the peace she was looking for. It took me weeks to understand what really happened that night. She didn't choose me by chance. It wasn't a coincidence that I stopped at that specific gas station at that exact time. Laura led me there with a very clear purpose. She wanted her body to be found. I talked again with my friend Carlos about the case details. He told me that her family was desperate, without answers. Her mother had developed severe depression, couldn't accept that her daughter had simply disappeared. Her father spent all his savings hiring private detectives. She used my weakness as a man to lead me exactly where she needed. She knew that if she offered what she offered, I wouldn't resist. She manipulated me calculatedly, led me through seduction to that side road, knowing that I would eventually return there and talk about what had happened. As disturbing as it is to admit, I was just a tool for her, a means to achieve her ultimate goal, and it worked perfectly. Her body was found, her family had closure, she could finally rest. My wife notices that something has changed in me, but in a different way than I expected. I am more present with my family, more grateful for our time together, because now I know that life can be interrupted at any moment, and that we don't always get a chance to say goodbye properly. The weight of guilt still exists, not for the betrayal I almost committed, but for taking so long to understand that she needed help. If I had contacted the authorities immediately, if I hadn't tried to forget what happened, perhaps her family would have suffered less time. I went back to driving that route normally. The first time I passed the spot where we found the body, I pulled over the truck and said a silent prayer. I thanked her for choosing me, for trusting me to be the instrument of her liberation, even if in such a disturbing way. Today I understand that the supernatural is not always about terror or a curse. Sometimes it's about lost souls who need help finding their way back home. Laura was not a malevolent entity. She was a desperate daughter wanting to return to her family's arms. The road taught me that we carry responsibilities that go beyond what we can see, that sometimes we are called to serve purposes greater than our initial understanding allows, and that even in our moments of weakness, we can be instruments of something greater. Laura rested. Her family found peace, and I learned that not all supernatural encounters are about tormenting us. Some are about making us part of something more important than our own lives. But the mystery of how she managed to manifest so really, so physically, that secret she took with her to the other side. Well, folks, this is my story. I know many of you will question if this really happened, if it wasn't just a delusion of someone who drove too long on the road. And I completely understand that reaction. But the documents are here with me. The GPS record showing exactly where I stopped. The cabin footage where I talked to someone the camera didn't capture. The police report of the body found. These are evidences that I cannot simply ignore or explain as coincidence. What strikes me most about this whole experience is realizing how the world of the living and the dead sometimes connects in ways that our rational mind refuses to accept. Laura found a way to return, even if temporarily, to resolve an issue that kept her trapped between the two worlds. And that makes me wonder, how many other lost souls are out there trying to communicate something important? How many of us have already experienced strange situations that we simply dismissed as coincidence or tiredness? Now I ask those of you who are watching, what if it were you? What if tomorrow, driving alone on a deserted road, a person appeared asking for a ride? And what if that person knew intimate details of your life that you never told anyone? And what if she offered you exactly what you secretly desire but know you shouldn't accept? Would you have the courage to find out if it's real or not? Because one thing I learned, we don't always get to choose when the supernatural decides to find us. Sometimes we are the ones chosen for a mission that we only understand after everything ends. If you've had any similar experiences, if you've ever felt inexplicable presences on the road or elsewhere, leave your stories in the comments. Who knows? Together, we might better understand these mysteries that life insists on putting in our path. Thank you so much for listening to my story until the end. I know it wasn't easy, that it stirs primitive fears we all have. But sometimes we need to share these experiences so they don't just haunt one person. If today's account touched you in any way, leave a like on the video. It helps the channel reach more people who may have experienced similar situations. Subscribe so you don't miss the next cases we'll investigate, and turn on notifications. And remember, the next time you're driving alone on a dark road, pay attention to the details. Observe if the person asking for a ride actually casts a shadow on the ground. Notice if they leave footprints where they step, because not everyone we meet on the road is still part of our world. Good night, everyone, and drive safe.